Kia ora, whānau. It's exciting to be here tonight, I must say. I have been waiting for this one. Whilst everyone's just jumping onto our call this evening, I will get us all set up and ready to go. So I am hoping that many of you are ready and waiting with your Lady H gin, of course. That's what we're tasting tonight. Your bottle of Lady H, your tasting notes. You'll need some ice and a glass. And if you are so inclined, I believe we're going to make a martini. And so therefore, we're definitely going to need a martini glass. I've got a shaker ready with some ice in it, which I'm hoping won't melt in this Auckland heat. And I've got some vermouth ready to go as well. So if you are wanting to, kia ora, Cordula, nice to have you with us. If you are wanting to make a martini along with Donna, who I believe knows a thing or two about martinis, then tonight is your night for that. So if you're just joining us, I've just let everybody know, make sure you get your gin and your tasting notes ready to go. Nice glass with ice in it. And if you are going to make a martini with us, then it is, yeah, wow, that's fancy, Donna.
It's quite cool, eh?
It's beautiful.
A little bit pretty.
I can tell that there's going to be a little bit of glass comparison stuff going on here tonight as well. So I'm really looking forward to this one tonight. It feels like, I don't know, we'll probably have John and a few others joining us as well, but it could be just, you know, it feels a little bit like a night for us girls. I don't know. But it'll be a great evening anyway. So without Cordula's in fine form tonight, Donna. She's saying she loves a good martini, which we know about Cordula. So it's very exciting. And Cordula, thank you very much for our happy birthday message as well. For everybody that has already received their box, you will know that this is our month, our birthday month. So it's going to be an exciting month anyway. Well, I'm going to stop babbling. I can see that people are starting to jump on. Glad to finally make it to a tasting. Well, we're glad to have you with us as well, but we can't tell who you are, Facebook user. So it is wonderful to have you. This is obviously your first tasting. You're in for a lovely evening with us. And I can see that Dot is here, ready, waiting, willing. Dot, are you in for a martini tonight? It'd be great. I'm very excited by this. All right, so without further ado, I am going to hand over to Donna. Donna, it's fabulous to have you with us. As I said to everybody, I've been so excited waiting for this one this week. And I love your story. I love how you came to do this. Donna and I have obviously had a little bit of a chat prior to getting on the call. And so I've just got an error message coming up. Why is that doing that? Anyway, so I'm really excited to hand over to Donna. And Donna, please tell us, how did you get involved in gin?
A little bit randomly, to be honest. So I think Sarah and her team have given you guys a little bit of a story background of me. So it all started when we decided to get out of the big smoke, basically from Auckland, which is where we've been for many, many years, and went down to a little place called Naseby in the middle of central Otago. So if you guys know that region or you're from that region, hello, but it's literally in the centre of nowhere actually, but it's beautiful. So it was a great change. And we did that because we'd been living, a crazy, hectic, busy, rat race treadmill of a life with busy jobs where, you know, things just become a little bit all consuming. I was a police sergeant in the New Zealand Police for a number of years, and which I loved, my dream, you know, it's what I'd always wanted to do, and had got to a place with it after of years of stress, and before I was prosecuting, I was in some teams that were dealing with some really some awful stuff with child abuse and stuff, and got to a place where it was like, actually, you know, enough's enough. We need some time out, and so we did that, which was awesome in idea, but the reality was a little bit different. You know, kind of going from go to screaming nothing was a little bit hard of an adjustment for me. And so I started, I needed to find something to do, basically, because I'd kind of lost my purpose and was kind of working through some stuff, you know, that my career had taken me through. And anyway, started studying wine, and because we were in this beautiful place of Central Otago, right on the doorstep of just New Zealand's most amazing wine growing region. And part of that was an introduction, basically, to basic distillation and how the mechanics of all of that works. And unbeknownst to me, I actually found an interest in it. And then kind of in the deepest depths of winter, you know, kind of -10 outside, and it isn't a great deal to do, I started mucking about. Basically, it happened with my husband was making some terrible beer, and the Kunis were almost becoming alcoholics because they just kept getting tipped this awfulness that was not palatable to us. And when actually I reckon I could try and muck about and do something a little bit better than pouring it out for the pigs, and started like that. Worked through some visions that some very loving and ever suffering friends were our taste testers, or my taste testers, and you know, most of it really started like a science experiment, to be honest, and just got really interested in it and kept mucking about, and was in you know, foraging for different things. Got told about a lovely, beautiful, ancient juniper tree up the back of the hotel at the Danzies Pass, and so went finding that and found it, and kind of started getting interested in botanicals once I'd kind of worked out the basics of how to make actual alcohol out of essentially beer or any fermented product, really. And kind of went from there, really, and decided that perhaps my taste for martinis that I had developed might be an opportunity for me to go, I wonder if I could make a really beautiful, clean and simple, elegant gin that I could have with a martini. And that's kind of it, really. Went from nothing to what we are today in about 4 years, give or take.
Wow.
Took a lot of kind of, I don't know if this is any good, you know, because it's hard to know whether your friends are actually just being kind, to some people going, actually, I think you've got, you know, something that's quite nice. And then it was the lockdown in 2020, the first one, that I was like, well, what are we doing? You know, is this worth giving it a crack? And we decided, yes, maybe let's give it a try, see what happens. And then started all of the journey with, you know, manufacturing, basically, which was so far out of my comfort zone, but such a huge learning curve, and interesting again on a whole lot of other different things, you know, bottling and labeling and, you know, corks and all sorts of just things you just don't even turn your mind to, I guess, when you haven't come from a manufacturing background. I don't think there's anything probably far more removed than going from the police to making gin. Or maybe maybe they're more closely related than you think. Who knows, you know. Yeah, so that's basically how it came to be. Gave it a crack, and before we knew it, we'd actually sold a pallet of gin within a very, very short time. A couple of months.
Put that into perspective. How many bottles is in a pallet?
853 for my bottle, because as I've learnt that pallets come in, depending on the shape and the size and the volume of your bottle, depends on how many you actually get on a pallet. So yeah, I mean, give or take 800, because at least 50 of them went to friends and family and samples and this, that, and the other. So 800 basically is a nice round figure for a pallet.
Amazing though, isn't it?
Yeah, it knocked my socks off actually. I was floored, and still am really. It's still quite bizarre to walk into a store and see it on the shelf, and have a quite chuckle to yourself, going, oh my god, it's actually there. And then so that was a year ago, or not quite a year ago. It was May last year. And then to actually start hearing people talking about it, and not even people that I know, because of course it starts with people that you do know talking about it, and all of a sudden, people get in contact with you via Facebook or you just see these interactions happening just with the different gin clubs and stuff like that on social media, and you're like, oh my goodness, wow, actually
they like my gin. Yeah.
yeah, so it's quite cool. And exactly what I'd hoped for, because that's exactly what I was trying to do. There's just such a vast array of flavour profiles and styles, for want of a better word, in the craft gin market all around the world. But in New Zealand, it's just exploded, which is fantastic. And there's a gin for everyone, and there's a flavour profile for everyone. But because I think I was selfishly making this for me, what I wanted was I just wanted something simple and elegant and clean, and I don't want to say plain or not fussy, but just let the gin be just gin. And that it married beautifully, with vermouth, which is such a strong flavour, in itself. And so that's kind of my story. There's a whole lot of other stuff, I guess, as well, but you're just not quite sure what people want to hear, what they're interested in, what's boring,
Well, I'm sure we'll pick up on some more as we go through.
Yeah.
Now, as you've been talking about it, oh, sorry, my dog. Sorry, shouldn't even be around this side of the house. As we're talking about it, I'm getting my bottle and having a little keen smell. So on the nose, it is very subtle on the nose, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got it's. I mean, some people wouldn't call it juniper forward, but in terms of the flavour profile that's in it, it's definitely a more juniper forward gin, than a citrus forward gin. And I think that sometimes the two can get muddled in terms of identifying out, because juniper is a citrus flavour, and so the sharpness that is there from the citrus is not as pronounced, which is I guess why I say it's more juniper forward than it is citrus forward. So hopefully people can smell that. I don't know, does everybody want to pour some gin? It's probably,
yes, of course they do. They'll be like, Sarah, stop talking. Let's just get on tasting the gin. Let's get on with it, shall we, people? Whilst we're pouring, though, I agree with Cordula. That juniper tree sounds amazing. It
was amazing.
You are lucky to have found one in New Zealand, right?
I know, right? And commercially, I mean, I haven't been able to sustain foraging, because the amount of juniper that you do need is a lot. So, so I do buy it now. But yeah, that was actually part of it. And actually the part of that story that is really neat actually is a lovely old friend of ours from Naisville, who was in his 90s, who raised his kids up there and took them camping up in this area where where the tree was the person that really gave me the tips initially of how to bring botanicals together. And so he was back in the 50s and the 60s. He would make, his own wine out of whatever was, in season at the time, and had also taught himself how to make gin and all sorts of other, home distillations. And so Des was a really instrumental part in my gin journey, which was quite special, really, because he recently passed away.
I was going to say, it sounds like that was a past tense. Yeah.
So it was really neat to actually almost feel like, knowledge was being handed down.
How amazing.
Yeah, so that was cool. And it'll always be special, and to know that he had a really key part in tasting some of those awful concoctions as well. And had no fear with critiquing me, which, as only a 90-odd-year-old can do. Which was cool. So everyone give yourselves a pour.
I've poured mine over ice, Donna. Is that what you'd recommend, or would you recommend room temperature?
I guess, each to their own. A lot of people aren't potentially familiar with the potency of drinking straight alcohol, or the vapor, the alcoholic vapor fumes, and that gets a lot of people. But yeah, definitely, it's been described to me as just like an elegant sipping gin. So having it over ice is perfect, actually, and it is a way that you can taste the botanicals, because like with any gin, it doesn't, I don't think, no matter how strong the flavor profile is, the moment you start adding even soda water to it, it's diluting the flavor profile and it's changing, and the molecules are interacting in a different way, and so even the way they interact with each other changes the moment that you add something to it.
So Cordula was commenting on the nose. She's saying it's very smooth and awfully inviting on the nose. I totally agree. And then Dot's already had a taste. She says definitely sharp juniper. And I must admit, that's the first time of having a sip of a gin that I think I've really got that juniper, that real piney note of the juniper coming through. And it's lovely.
And I think that part of the reason for, like I've said, is that because the citrus isn't as strong, and the reason that the citrus isn't as strong is because I've taken a lot of the citrus flavor actually from the coriander seed rather than from citrus peel itself. So there's no citrus peel in it at all. Instead, actually, from a pure citrus perspective, I've just used fresh citrus. And so by doing that, I've got the sweetness that comes from fresh pulp fruit, rather than like anything, particularly when you have dry skin and pith, the bitterness that comes mainly from pith. You can't eliminate extracting that bitterness that comes with it. But when it's in a fresh form, it just doesn't seem to extract the bitterness in the same way, and so actually a lot of citrus flavor that comes through from most gins does come from the coriander seed, because in its whole form, coriander seed has a mild citrus scent to it when you've just got it in your hand. But the moment you actually crack it open and you expose more surface area of the inners of the seed, that's when it's just like a punch of citrus in the face. And it's quite cool. But it's a different citrus, again, from the citrus elements that juniper brings and from citrus itself, So it's kind of a marrying of these different tones of citrus, if that's the way to describe it, rather than it just being all from one style of citrus. So that's why it's not so overly potent citrus.
Yeah, but do you think that gives it a more rounded citrus element to it?
I think so, yeah, because I'm not relying simply on one element to bring the citrus component through. Yeah, and I think that goes a long way in my mind as to when it is described as quite balanced, because it's not pushing, really strongly in one way or the other. And as a result of that, also because yes, you've got enough citrus there for it to still be gin, because I don't think that if you haven't really got there, then you can call it gin, but people aren't going to recognize it as that, because there's an expected flavor profile there for what people like. That's why they drink it, because they do actually like that citrus flavor, but because it is soft like that and it's balanced, it allows the really delicate botanicals that often just get lost. They're there and they definitely contribute to what you will always taste in a gin, but often it's really hard to identify them out, individually. And that's because citrus is such a strong flavor in anything, even in food cooking, it's a really strong flavor that will always overpower, anything else that's in your dish or your drink,
So you've done remarkably well to keep it kind of as a supporting role in the background.
Yeah, I think it, it is certainly the element and the flavor profile that brings it all together and makes it gin being gin, but it allows, I think that it allows you to have different layers to it as you're drinking it, that you can start to identify, and so for me, I think that's where it gets interesting, that you can actually go, oh, actually I can taste a little bit of floral there, or the licorice, just enough for it to be there, but not overpoweringly that it's polarizing or it's becoming, more of a liqueur style type drink,
when the botanical kind of smacks you in the face and says, hey, I'm here, and then you can't taste anything else but.
Well, that's right, and there's a place for that, and sometimes, in a cocktail, that's exactly what you want, because that's what you're creating. But I think for me, I didn't want to have any one flavor really polarizing, so that firstly it didn't work with vermouth, and secondly that it really just sung on its own song sheet, just a balanced gin. So has everyone been able to have a taste and see if they can, identify the other botanicals that might be?
Yeah, so we've definitely got. So Cordiala's saying she gets aniseed flavor up front, but then definitely the juniper.
Yeah, there's definitely the aniseed is coming from the angelica root. So there's not a lot of angelica root in there, because that's very much like orris root, which is where the florals come from. They're both botanicals where a little bit goes a very long way. They're very powerful in their flavor, particularly the orris root, which is it's actually the root of the iris plant. And so that, and so that is where people go, oh, I can taste, it's quite florally. Or sometimes you'll have a gin and it's described as being like a lavender style flavor. That's where that's coming from. Well, that's where, unless they've particularly infused,
they've added,
but if that's something you can that you can identify, it's definitely coming from orris root, which is a traditional botanical that's always used in a London dry gin style.
So Dot's saying that the citrus rounds it off. I think Dot quite likes a little bit of citrus in her gin.
Yeah.
And then another Facebook user, definitely get the licorice note, but it's not overpowering. Yeah.
Because it's a strong flavor. and so you don't want it to be overpowered. And I think that part of the reason why it's there but not overpowering is that there's some cinnamon in it as well, so I've used the cinnamon to kind of bring it all back down again. It's like a grounding, like a grounding and balancing botanical. Or the way that it interacts with the others, that's the effect that it has, and it just gives it enough warmth without it being spice.
Yeah.
And then
the mouth finish as well is like beautiful and clean and crisp, like really refreshing in the mouth.
Yeah, well, and that's I guess that's what I was going for. I wasn't wanting something that is overly oily, and that just comes down to a little bit of distillation technique. There are different ways you can do that you can deliberately extract a lot of essential oil, essentially, which is certainly what I did in the early days. Some of working out that balance of how much juniper in particular, because juniper, even in its dry form, has a lot of natural essential oil in it. And so you're extracting a lot, and which is often where you, if you have a gin, that you get that oily mouthfeel, which is lovely, and it gives it a full feeling. That's beautiful, and it's kind of slides down your throat, lovely. But it'll also generally probably have a really citrus forward flavour to it as well, because it's extracting so much more of that juniper essential oil. But I've tried to get enough so that you've got your citrus from your juniper, without it detracting from the cleanness, which is what I was trying to aim for when you have it in a martini. That I wanted that clean, and because at the end of the day, but when you start adding sodas and tonics in particular to gin, you lose that full flavour anyway, So and then the last botanical is just dried fruit, so that's where a little bit of a sweet finish is coming from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how much of the I just realized it's getting dark here and I haven't got a light on. 2 seconds. I was just going to say, how much of the finish do you think comes from the base spirit as well, Donna? Because you said you made your own, right?
Yeah, so it comes from wine. So essentially any base spirit can be from any fermented liquid, So, a bucket full of peaches, it'll eventually break down and ferment if there's enough natural yeast in it. So, sorry. So wine essentially is what I landed as the ferment that I could get as clean as possible without bringing elements of the natural original product through. So with a beer, which is what whiskey is made out of, it's a wheat ferment. Just beer without the hops. As much as I love that, and I do love whiskey, it was the wheat. I couldn't get rid of the wheat flavour basically enough, to be able to leave the quantity of botanicals that I was wanting to use to achieve what we've just talked about, with enough of those flavour profiles without it being overpowering and still being clean. To do it in that way using a wheat base, I would have had to have gone heavier on the botanical load, and that just brings a whole lot of other not issues, but it's just not what I wanted to do. I would become something heavier is probably a way to describe it. What I would have had to. I would certainly played with it, but yeah, so wine is where I ended up, which is which is quite cool, because it's
also where you started off, isn't it?
Pardon?
It's also where you started off, isn't it?
Yeah. In terms of what I was looking into originally and studying.
Yeah.
So it was interesting that just through a whole lot of trial and error, really, I kind of worked out that was the easiest, not easiest, but it was what worked best with what I was trying.
Got the result that you were looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully it's, I guess hopefully I describe it as more of a contemporary modern gin rather than a traditional London Dry style gin. London Dry, obviously, with the botanical profile that it's in there, it has its origins there. But I think because I've tweaked it, going away from peel, and adding certainly the dried fruit to it as well, kind of takes it into a little bit of a different category, which is cool, because it's something a little bit different.
Yeah, very much. And I mean, what's everybody else thinking? This is slid down very easily. It's very refreshing. It's very smooth. It feels quite light as well. You know how you sip a gin straight, it's like, wow, punch you in the back of the throat kind of thing.
Yeah.
This doesn't do that at all.
Good.
Yeah, it's beautiful, but you've still managed to maintain that dryness as well, which I'm really appreciating, because I think the last few we've have had quite a full oily finish,
right.
And so this is really nice to have that, that lovely light fresh feel in the mouth.
Yeah, I think that I mean, it sounds a little bit cliche, but like the old saying of a little bit goes a long way and less is more, kind of came about as sayings for a reason, and I think that yeah, like I said earlier, is that sometimes you do want I don't want to say the weird and the wonderful, but you want something that is very specific, or you're having a cocktail, or you've got friends around, and someone's brought all different types of things along, and so there's a place for that. But sometimes actually, when we've had kind of weeks like we've probably had in the last one or two, at least for most of us, where people's stress levels and works and life management and life admin just gets a bit chaotic, you just want something simple to sit down after a hot day and just go
Exactly.
And hopefully, I think that's, for me anyway, I know that that's what I get out of it.
Yeah.
That you don't even have to think about your drink. Sometimes you actually just want to have a drink and unwind, but equally, I think also that the layers that I've got in there allow it to, when you are in a place where you're talking with other gin enthusiasts or somebody that might be asking you about what your opinion on it is that you can have enough interest there that you can have a chat about it as well.
Yeah. So we've got one of our members is saying, "I love Oris Forward."
Do you? Wow.
First time I've heard that comment, so that's awesome.
I certainly made a few that I was like, oh my gosh, I think I've made lavender juice somehow. I didn't know how I did it. But I very quickly worked out that, a little bit goes a long way.
Yeah.
But it's also...
Do you use that as a powdered form?
Yeah.
So that makes it even harder, doesn't it?
Yeah, you have to basically put it into really fine Hessian bags and hope that too much of it doesn't leak through. But then that's a little bit also of the craft. Every batch is going to be slightly different because it depends on the temperature of the day and the time of the year. If you do one batch and then on days like today that's humid and it's 29 degrees, or you do one in the middle of Naseby in the dead of winter at -10 and it's permafrost for 3 months, you do get slightly different interactions inside the condenser. Yeah, because it condenses at different rates given the different temperatures, so yeah. Has everyone were they game enough to try it straight, or has everyone cracked straight on to having it with soda?
Well, I definitely vote for our members that they will always try it straight. I think several of them to start off with were like, don't really like it straight. But I think actually over time, people, it's growing on them. So whoever it was that joined us and this is their first tasting, you really drew the jackpot tonight, because this is a really easy one to drink over ice, whereas I think some of the other members would vouch. There's been a couple that have been quite harsh to drink over ice. Kirsten's saying it's very easy to drink over ice, isn't it? Nice to have you with us, Kirsten. We haven't seen you for a while, so it's lovely. You're not wrong about the stress levels, says Dot. Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to go, actually, I want to block the world out and sit on the deck or sit in the back of or and even just in front of the TV. It's, and have a gin.
Yeah. So talking of having a gin, I've been looking forward to this all night because I'm really keen to try it in a martini. So I hope others came armed and ready. I'm fairly certain that one person definitely didn't. I'm fairly certain Cordula came ready for a martini. And I hope others are able to as well. Donna, would you mind talking us through how you make a martini?
Yeah, so I don't use a shaker. I use a I don't even actually know what these are called. Stirrer?
Boston.
Yeah. And so what I do is either keep your martini glass in the freezer so it's always nice and chilled, but actually I'm just going to get some ice and fill it up. So just put ice into
Oh, Cordula, I love it.
What's
Cordula
that?
says she's always ready for a martini.
Oh, nice. Nothing beats it. And so I sit the ice in the glass, and then what I actually do is I actually only use 5 mils because I like a really, really dry martini. And so for those that aren't martini drinkers on here, the more vermouth you add to a martini, the further away from a dry martini you get, And so it's all up to you as to what your palate is, and then, trial and error. But for me, I've worked out that actually, because it's such a strong flavour, a little bit goes a long way. And so 5 mils over ice in there, and give it a little bit of a swirl around to get it moving without it going everywhere, and let it sit. And then I get my jigger or free pour if you don't want to use one of these. And I put 60 mils of gin into my ice-filled stirrer. So 60 mils, sounds like a lot of alcohol, but, a martini is a pretty boozy drink, to be honest. But you're only really having ice and gin in the martini. So once you start stirring it and stirring it and stirring it and stirring it, and I'm going to add a little bit more ice because mine has actually melted a little bit. But basically, if you're starting this with ice that is completely solid, you're just going to stir and stir and stir and stir and stir and stir and stir, and then I let it sit. And basically you let it sit for about 5 minutes. And while it's sitting, the ice is all melting into itself. So you're not it's basically doing the same thing as what you're forcing the shaker to do, but you're just letting it do it naturally, which, I mean, I don't actually think either way of shaking or stirring is better than the other. It's just preference, I think, personally, unless somebody a little bit more up on maybe there is a proper reason as to why you do one versus the other, but I've certainly found I find it easier really to let it sit and melt, and the alcohol content of the gin does the melting for you, and that's it. So you let it stir.
So okay. What's everybody else? Those who are, so I know Cordula and Kirsten, keen martini drinkers. Dot, I think Dot does the odd martini. Do you, Dot? I know that Dot usually is a straight up over ice or absolutely straight drinker. I know she likes her whiskey that way as well.
Oh yeah, I like single malts, definitely like that. Yeah. Not even ice, because that just ruins it.
I'm like that with whiskey. I don't like it over ice. My husband has it over ice, but I just think you lose a lot of the caramelness of a lot of them.
Yeah. I think it depends on what it is. You know, it depends on also where it's from. You know, like the Spaysides, the softer ones, you can maybe put a drop of water with it just to open up those. The florals actually is what I find you open up by doing that. But no, I'm like you. I like the caramels. So
same. Yeah. Kirsten, you have the patience of a saint by sitting there waiting for it.
Yeah, I know, right? And then so you take your glass full of your ice that you've just poured the vermouth in, and you pour it into your shaker, which is a little bit harder if you've got your top on and you've already been shaking it with ice. And then you just stir it all through, and you've got a really, I don't know that you guys can see.
Such a beautiful glass.
Thank you. Just pour it into, trying not to get your ice and splashing
the top of your shaker into your glass.
And then, dependent on what your fancy is, whether it be a twist or an olive. I'm an olive girl. So,
that looks beautiful.
And there's your martini.
Wow. Cheers, everybody. I've gone for a little twist of lemon in mine.
Yes.
Although I do love a good olive, I must say. Okay, who else has made a martini along with us? I wonder whether I've added too much vermouth into mine. I'm a bit concerned. Oh, no, I haven't. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely.
So the 5 mils, I mean, it depends on personal taste. If you like a really dry one where you can get definitely, you know, more of the gin flavor, and because Lady H is such a soft, delicate gin, I think if you were to add much more vermouth in that, then you're going to get back to it. The problem you have sometimes with tonics, where you just aren't even able to taste the gin anymore. Yeah. And, you know, because without realizing that vermouth is a really, really strong flavor, you know.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Nice. I guess for those that aren't into martinis or just don't like them, what I recommend with Lady H for drinking is just soda water. You know, so your gin with soda. And then what I do for those that really love that G&T flavour, I find the best of both worlds is to fill the liquid volume up with your soda, right? And then just go a splash of tonic and give it a stir. So you're getting, you know, obviously a lovely volume filled glass, able to still taste the gin, but get the nice tonic flavour that you enjoy, which, you know, to be fair, is actually lovely on a really hot day. You know, there's actually nothing quite like a nice gin and tonic, and it's not super sweet. For me, I find that if I have a whole glass full of tonic, it's just a little bit sweet for my palate. You know, and it doesn't have all the sugar, which is quite nice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, Kirsten's saying, Kirsten says she basically just opens the vermouth and wafts it in the general direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we've got a friend that he makes it where he just pours the tiny little vermouth into the glass without the ice and pours it down, you know, the side of it here, and then swirls the glass around and coats the glass actually with it, and then you just have your gin and your ice melted together, and that's what your the volume of your liquid comes from. And then when it gets into the glass, it's when it connects up with the vermouth, which is exactly what you've just said, that it just is enough to kiss the drink with vermouth, and that's actually all it needs. Yeah.
So good. What's Cordula saying? By Braille. How did you pour vermouth by Braille?
Not looking.
Mm. It is really delicious, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that for me, like I find it quite creamy.
Yes.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
really do get that.
Yeah, so the gin seems to interact and with that amount of vermouth anyway. Yeah, just in a way that it kind of creates this creaminess at the back of your palate. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, is your end glitching as well? My
No, I don't seem to be able to see any comments.
Okay, that's weird. We had that problem last week. I'll just keep bringing them up so then you can see them on screen.
Okay.
Okay. Here we have it. The famous line from Cordula. I haven't heard about this for a while now, Cordula. It's a shame because I do love your jalapeno stuffed olives. Okay, so you're not going to put them in this one because a little too strong for this martini.
You could take the jalapenos out and maybe then just, that actually might be interesting. That'd be interesting to just see how much of a kick what that does to the gin.
Can we go a little lemon? I'm enjoying it with a little bit of lemon. That's quite lovely.
Yeah. The other thing that I have it with sometimes, and it depends on the time of the year, and it depends on what the weather's doing or the mood that you're in, is, particularly in wintertime, sometimes if you've got them, have it with a cinnamon quill. And that's interesting because it just brings this subtle spice, warming spice forward. And pardon me, it's interesting how what I find is the garnishes definitely, because it's a soft, gentle, balanced gin. What I find is the garnish tends to bring out whatever the garnish is. So like so if you put a slice of lemon in it, it'll bring the citrus flavors to the front. If you put the cinnamon quill in it, it'll bring the warming spice of the cinnamon forward. But then, just even having this a slice of apple, that'll bring the dried fruit that's in it forward. I haven't tried it with like a Granny Smith or anything like that. I think that might be a little bit bitter for enhancing that sweetness. But yeah, it's definitely going to bring the sweeter elements forward.
That's so interesting with a slice of apple in the martini.
Oh no, just in your gin. Oh, you could do it in your martini.
I was going to say I'd still stick it in my martini.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I think it would be because I think the olives in particular in a martini, they bring that oil balance to it, because a martini is quite a sharp drink. And so I think the olive is designed to bring that balance. Not quite sure what the lemon twist. I guess that's just because it's a citrus forward, because it's a gin forward drink. So it's a citrus forward complement, I guess. But yeah, so it seemed I've only tried that with my gin and soda, because I generally just have it with soda. I don't really even have the tonic with it. And that's kind of how it interacts in those drinks.
I can see that this one in particular, and you and I talked about this before, is, it's such a beautiful but subtle gin that adding too much tonic to it would just be, you'd lose all sight of the gin, wouldn't you?
You do. And, I think that for some people that can be a criticism of it. It's not powerful enough to punch through the tonics. Well, actually, no, it's not, because it was never designed to do that, because I did it deliberately to have it either straight on the rocks, just with soda, or with martini, which, like I've said, selfishly, because that's the way I drink gin. But I think that's okay, and that that's why I just recommend having the splash for those that really do love that tonic flavour. You know, you can get the best of both worlds, but yeah, no, definitely, it's never ever gonna punch through. You know, some of the East Imperial tonics that are, I think it's the old world, no, the old Burma, the Burma is double quinine. You know,
And
so
the old world is
it's old
that's
world.
really strong.
Yeah. It is. Look, I don't see the point probably in having my gin with a tonic like that, because all you are going to taste is the tonic. You know. But I've had it. You know, I've had it with the Fever Tree Mediterranean tonic, because I find that that's a really light type of tonic. They also do the refreshingly light Indian tonic. And so that's another, again, I find that stronger than the Mediterranean. I'm not quite sure why, but
that's so interesting, because I find the Mediterranean a little flavored, and I prefer the refreshingly light because I find it less flavored.
Right. Yeah, no, I guess this is the way different. That's the thing, isn't it? You know, that's like, you know, gins or whiskies or wines. You know, there's so much interest there, because not only are they all different and there's such a vast array of options, but everyone's palate tastes things differently. You know, yeah, so it's interesting. But yeah, just normal soda water, really. You know, just even out of the soda stream is actually all that you need, for me anyway. You know, it doesn't have to be. I've had a friend that loves it with I think it's Fever Tree. They do a cucumber one?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So he reckons he loves it.
That one.
Yeah. He loves it, because he's like, oh my gosh, you know, there's just not many gins that he thought, in his opinion, marries with the cucumber gin. You know, he believes that it just creates a funny aftertaste with some. But yeah, but for mine, it's, you know, it's great. I've never tried it.
I can see how they would suit really nicely together.
But
I think you'd still have to do your strategy of just a splash over the top, because it's quite strong in cucumber flavour.
Yeah, and but they're all soft drinks, right? So they're really heavy in sugar, and it's actually the sugar component that is what's overpowering the flavour of the gin.
Yeah.
So I don't know what one you're going to have. You're gonna definitely overpower my gin every single time if you have that as your whole glass of liquid, you know, because it's just not strong enough to compete with it. And you're talking about, you know, a 30 ml shot or 40 ml shot if you're free pouring, you know, to, you know, 150 to 200 mils, depending on the size of your glass, I guess, of this other liquid, you know, so it's a volume game as well. But yeah, so that's my gin, really. I guess one thing I haven't talked about is the name. So I came up with the name. Sorry, that's my dogs now, because they can.
I know, yeah. Responding to my terribly naughty dog.
Here you go. Sorry. Yeah, so Lady H is essentially Donna Hemingway, really. It's my name, it's a transliteration. So Donna in Italian is lady. And it's as simple as that, really. It kind of just came to me actually during that first lockdown, when we were like, oh, what are we going to do? Are we going to do anything or not? You know, and I started down the journey of working out bottles, which was just quite overwhelming, really. Because there's just so many options. Where do you even start? You know, and how do you pick something that's got a little bit of a point of difference? You know, from the wonderful selection that we've got in New Zealand now. You know, you walk into any bottle store or most bottle stores, and you know they've got 2 or 3 huge shelves of gin, you know, and so finding something to stand out in the crowd was kind of my thought process when we were going through that stage. And so so the H was just something that I could get them to stand out on the shelf, you know. White, actually, it was my Chanel No. 5 bottle was my inspiration the whole way through, because I'd been able to, I think, create this clean, classic, elegant gin, you know. And it's like, actually, I want to portray that, you know, in the packaging. And so the more I just looked at it, I sat on the bench here for weeks and weeks and weeks, and just kept looking back at it and going, actually, there's probably, in terms of branding, you know, marketing, there's nothing a little bit more classical than Coco Chanel No. 5, you know, and its labeling is almost as relevant and modern today as what it was 100 years ago, you know. So something that's certainly, you know, stood the test of time. And it was a way for me to be able to, in my own way, kind of come a little bit full circle with my story as well. You know, it was the whole journey of this allowed me to have a little bit of healing through, you know, through things in the police. And as a woman in that organisation who was promoting, I'd kind of lost a little bit of myself, you know, and a little bit of that femininity to be able to do what I was doing for a while. So it was quite nice to be able to create something that allowed me to get back in touch with that creative side that I'd forgotten about, you know, and it being soft and feminine but strong, you know, all at the same time, really, you know, and that it's okay to be both, which is a little bit cliche, but it's the truth. You know, that's kind of the story behind what I wanted Lady H to be, you know, as a brand.
And I can honestly say, Donna, you have really captured the elegance of your gin in your branding as well. You know, your bottle, your logo, it all just looks beautifully elegant and beautifully feminine. But, you know, like, obviously in a way that's incredibly appealing. I have seen many posts of people saying, I just like the look of the bottle, so I bought it without even knowing what
Really?
and then still being delighted.
Oh, good.
So yeah, absolutely. I think you know, you've captured that elegance. Okay, so a couple of comments to catch up on.
I can't see them, sorry, Sarah.
No, that's all right. I will bring them up. Okay, hang on. I have to catch up on a few things. So
Okay.
Dot's saying, if I'm having Asian spice food, then the spice in the gin is enhanced. Absolutely. I don't know whether Asian spice food would carry this gin all that well myself, but Dot, you are the expert in there.
Might get a bit lost.
It might, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Kirsten is a soda only house in her place.
Yeah.
So Kirsten, you probably haven't caught up, but I've been converted. Yourself and Tanya, who's also in the group, I think you guys have, you know, had an influence on me, and I'm converted.
Did you start out as a tonic lady?
I was totally tonic. In fact, you know, my husband, he still drinks Schweppes. That is his tonic of choice, and it's like drinking syrup to me. But I really do enjoy, you know, like, I just like that bitterness that comes out of the quinine in the tonic with my gin, because I don't have a sweet tooth. But I've really started to enjoy with a lot of that, you know, because I did notice that I was losing a lot of the flavor of the gin. And so then I started moving to soda and felt like it was holding the flavor a lot better, which was so much better. So, yeah.
And then the trick of just a splash is actually for most people that I've talked about that have then gone and tried it, they've gone, actually, wow, get the best of both. Exactly what you're talking about. Just enough of that bitterness that the quinine brings without it then being all you can taste.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question for you, Donna, from Kirsten. She's asking, what's next? What's next for Lady H?
I'm toying with the idea of bourbon.
Bourbon?
Yeah. I'm like, actually, why is it only blokes that get to enjoy bourbon, or people believe that bourbon is a bloke's drink? Actually, bourbon's amazing. It's that hybrid between whiskey and rum, I guess. It's got this just enough sweetness, and I think that that bourbon has probably, in most women's eyes, got a bad rap, because really you think of bourbon and you think of Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, Cody's. That brings back some interesting memories in the place. But I think bourbon is really interesting. Bourbon is very much like whiskey. Once you start getting out of Kentucky, you get into some very much like the whiskey, different profiles of the water that they use in the northern states of Indiana and Ohio and those types of northern inland states where it is colder, and the way that they distill it, because of those temperatures, is quite interesting, the effect that it has. And then aged, definitely a little bit differently. If I don't know, I'm just mucking about with it at the moment, but I've played with different things, played with a lot of elderflower, actually, particularly when we were in Naseby, because just before Christmas down there, elderflower is everywhere, so kind of got the husband out climbing fences and all sorts, to get all this elderflower, and tried distilling it and basically made cat pee. So that didn't work. And unfortunately, you just need to add a whole lot of sugar to it to kind of get it to where I think most people identify elderflower flavouring, because by nature it's a bit bitter. But also, I don't know, I think I've been mucking about with some cocktail mixes as well. I love good Tom Collins. Actually, I've come up with a recipe that's kind of Lady H-ified it, with adding some rose essence to it, which takes some of that, for those guys that drink citrus cocktails, how after you've had about 2 or 3, you kind of go, oh, I've had enough citric acid for now,
Yeah.
But adding this rose syrup, not syrup, but rose essence drops to it, just seems to calm that farm a little bit, and so you can kind of have a little bit more. Yeah, so a couple of different things. I basically wanted to focus on, getting into the market, because this is not my natural habitat, with everything that I've done before. So I needed to find my confidence, find my feet, make sure I wasn't going to fall flat on my face, first of all, and completely been shocked that actually, wow, people are really loving this. It's great, and I haven't fallen on my face, and just get to a place of being happy with that and concentrate on doing just one thing well for a little bit. Yeah, so I'm thinking that basically I'll work on a few things over the colder winter months and hopefully have something to add to the brand next summer. I guess we'll see what it brings. Got some bottles coming, so I've got a huge container actually of bottles arriving sometime in the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks. So I'm going to have to do something with them. So watch this space, basically. Yeah.
Lots of bottles going out.
Yeah. We'll come up with some different things. Some experiments work, some don't. Even the cocktail thing. You think, oh, that'll work well in a bottle. And then you have forgotten that it's got a natural element in it that doesn't quite work on a shelf.
Yeah, it doesn't have a good shelf life, right?
Yeah. So there's just learning going on all the time. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, it's been so fantastic to hear from you. I mean, I'm sure everybody agrees. This has been a wonderful, wonderful tasting. You're getting already, thank you for sharing from Cordula, Dot saying thank you. I hope these are coming up in time. My screen is really delayed at the moment, which is really weird. So I'm sorry if I haven't posted your comments as fast as I should have, or even if I have missed your comments, but my screen is for some reason just really delayed. I've been doing a lot of video work lately, and I think I'm actually wearing my own computer out, which is tragic.
Right.
Might be time for an upgrade. So lots of people loving the tasting, absolutely, obviously loving the gin as well, and please, if you are watching this on replay, oh, you're getting some great comments coming through about the I think there's a few people that are very happy about the bourbon. So watch the space, people. There's bottles coming, and there could be bourbon coming.
Yeah, there's lots of bottles coming.
So yeah, of course, if you have loved Lady H, as I have, the QR code is there on the back of your bottle, and you can just simply scan that, and we will be able to get a bottle out to you. Yeah, Kirsten, we have missed you. Please join us a lot more. And that has been, I was saying to Donna earlier, that's been partly us. We've had some very short notice periods for tastings. That will not be the case in future. So we apologize for that, but it's just been necessity, I suppose. Oh, here she goes again. Cordula, I've noted your comment about meeting the dogs. I don't know whether Hugo's handy. Is Hugo handy, Donna?
I don't know. Hugo. Oh no, he's on his couch. He's got the pip because he couldn't work out where the
Hugo when he's on the couch.
But his mother is walking up to him. So we've got 2 Newfoundlands. But Heidi is his mother. I don't know whether the camera's going to work all the way down. But no, I'd have to get it up and shift it. Take it off. Oh, okay. Take it off, the husband says. Heidi. There you go. There you go. Heidi. No. Heidi. No, sorry. He's not. Oh, there you go. You see her?
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
cute. What a beautiful chocolate.
Yeah, so she just got shaved the other day, so she's happier in this heat.
Yeah.
And yeah, Hugo's grumpy on his couch.
Well, Cordula, I will shoot a video for you in the Facebook group because Coco's now running around outside barking at everybody. So I'm going to have to go and sort that out in a second. Yeah, thank you, Donna. Thank you for spending an hour with us and taking us through your beautiful gin and sharing with us your martini recipe, because I know there's a lot of people that like to know how others are making a martini. And I, for one, you may have seen, really enjoyed that. It's got good. It was very, very delicious and very easy to drink.
Yeah, sometimes too easy, but that's an okay problem to have sometimes.
Yeah. And that was, let's be real, because I'd taken it out of the freezer before we had gone live, it wasn't even as cold as it could have been. So I think, there's a little room for improvement there, continuous improvement, to make sure it's straight out of the freezer and as cold as it can be. So
yeah. Or the ice in the glass trick. If you're desperate for a martini and you really don't want to wait the 5 or 10 minutes for your ice to actually melt, sometimes it's actually, you saw how I poured the ice into the glass to begin with. It's literally half that amount of ice, your 5 mils over the ice, your gin into it, stir and stir and stir, and let it actually just melt into the glass. There you go, same thing.
Okay, good.
A quick cheap version of a martini when you need it, when you first walk in the door.
And then, do you ever put your gin in the freezer? Last question.
No, I haven't put the gin in the freezer. I put the vermouth in the fridge. That's a tip because it's wine-based. Definitely, once you've opened your vermouth, keep it in the fridge. And it's probably only good for up to about 2 months. So just keep drinking martinis and you'll get through your bottle of vermouth.
And then you'll be good. Yeah. Okay.
But I haven't tried the gin in the freezer. Do you freeze your gin? Do you?
This one, the little bottle, I did put in the freezer before tonight's martini making. I learnt this tip of Cordula. She says that it's quite good to chill the gin. So that's what I did, and delicious, absolutely delicious. So thank you, Cordula.
Good tip. I'll give it a try. Did you freeze your glass as well?
Yeah, the glass was in the freezer, but as I said, the glass had sat there for a good 20-30 minutes beforehand. So in this heat, not so cold at all. Probably room temperature by the time we got to it.
Yeah. All good. Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been great, actually.
It's been fabulous.
Comments, so hopefully everybody got their questions answered.
I think so. Yeah. For some reason, there's a very weird lag at the moment with StreamYard. We may have to look at another platform if it's not going to play games. Yes, Cordula, I might even give you the last comment of the night. Martinis are the best. Absolutely.
Extra dry.
And this gin makes a fantastic martini, doesn't it?
Oh, good. I'm glad you feel that way because that was what it was all about to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. This gin makes the best martini I've ever had. So I'll be very interested in hearing. I'll be very interested in hearing Cordula's comments because she's the martini expert amongst us, and Kirsten as well. And I will share those with you as they come up.
We'll hold them on. Let me know. Yeah. And you guys can follow me on Facebook and Instagram and all that if you've got more questions.
Absolutely. All right, whānau, that is us for the evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Oh yeah, it was. Cordula's right. National Distillery guys said to freeze the gin. That's where Cordula got it from. Our very first ever tasting. Well done.
There you go.
Yeah. So that's us for tonight. I will be putting out a new tasting schedule for you over the weekend. I should have that all ready for you by the weekend for our next boxes worth of tastings. But please join me in thanking Donna tonight for being with us and thanking her for making such an exquisite gin. This is one of those ones that you will talk about, right? It's one of those ones that has that absolute beautiful point of difference that really only the gin lovers amongst us will really appreciate, I think. Don't tell your friends who are drinking Gordon's. Well, you can, but whether or not they'll taste it, I'm not too sure. But this is certainly for the discerning gin drinker, and I have so loved having this experience with you, Donna. Thank you for joining us. It's been fabulous.
My pleasure. Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, we will see you all very soon. As I say, I'll have your tasting schedule out by the weekend, so then you know when we are next meeting. And I look forward to seeing you again on our next tasting. And again, thank you, Donna Hemingway, for the beautiful gin and the wonderful tasting tonight.
Awesome. Have a good night.
See ya.
Yeah.